July was a pretty monumental month in the 100 book journey because in July, I actually read my 100th book, just about at the halfway point of the year, which is incredibly shocking to me. I did not expect to get this far this fast, but I've had a lot of downtime while my child naps to read. I've done a lot of audiobook listening, and we made it to 100. So what does that mean going forward? Well, I adjusted the goal. I didn't want to do another 100 books on top of that because I feel like maybe that's pushing it a little bit. We're just going to try and get to 150. So going forward for the shorts or for whatever, we're just going to try and get to 150. I'm very excited to have reached 100. Recording the video for the June wrap up, I was feeling a little bit bogged down. Burnt out isn't the right word. I was a bit bogged down by the amount of talking I was doing. Towards the end of that video, I felt like I wasn't really getting my points across on the books that I was talking about towards the end of that video because the sheer volume of books in a concentrated month was a bit too much. So in July, purposefully, I dropped back a little bit. I capped myself at 10. So I only have 10 books here, which hopefully means that I can go a little bit more in depth on these videos. I did do a full review for one of the books, so we'll talk about that when we get there. Without any further ado, without any preamble, let's talk about the best and worst books that I read in July. We're going to start with fiction, going from worst to best. First and foremost, a big disappointment for me, Project Hail Mary. This is a 2 out of 5 for me. I came right off of the heels of reading The Martian, right into Project Hail Mary. And if I had one piece of advice for you, the brave listener / reader out there, it is to not do that. These books are incredibly similar in structure. They're very similar in terms of overall themes, to the point where while reading through or listening through Project Hail Mary, I found myself getting confused if the protagonist was on Mars or on the spaceship trying to save Earth. These things are so very similar, down to some of the beats in which the story is written, where we go from first person perspective, character on their mission, flashback to either, Houston, mission control in The Martian, or in the past with Project Hail Mary, where there's a ragtag group of scientists trying to solve a problem. This may not be such a detriment to you if you space these books out a little bit more. But for me personally, I could not get the Martian comparisons out of my head. A book that I preferred quite a bit to Project Hail Mary. I don't know if that was that I felt that I was able to grasp more of the science in The Martian. It felt a little bit more down to earth. It felt a little bit less conceptual than the science in Project Hail Mary. I'm a dum-dum. I don't really enjoy science. I have never been a huge science fan. So for my level of interest / understandability, The Martian kind of scratched an itch that Project Hail Mary, a lot of that science just went right over my head. So these are all personal me problems. What I do want to touch on is maybe not a flaw in the writing. I don't ever want to get on here and say that I know more than the authors, but it does feel that the voice that Project Hail Mary is told through, our main protagonist, feels, as my wife perfectly put it, like a 16-year-old girl on the way to prom. I cannot describe how tedious it felt at times to read through first-person perspective with this person as our narrative, Ryland Grace. I really felt that I could connect with Mark Watney, the protagonist in The Martian, although he also had some snappy quips. I felt that his introduction as kind of the glue that keeps the crew together through his personality really helped kind of smooth those edges along as we got through each perspective chapter with Mark Watney. The inability to have that with Ryland Grace in Project Hail Mary really hurt it. Also, I may be judging unfairly on a curve because the science is more difficult perceivably, to me personally, in Project Hail Mary. I expected more of a staid scientist as a narrator, but it does make sense because he's not really a scientist. He's a former scientist who has become a grade school teacher. So all of these things I think that I'm bumping up against could be seen as positives for you. So I would not say steer clear of this book. What I would do is, like I said earlier, space out The Martian and Project Hail Mary. I think in real world there was like 8 years between the books. That makes a lot more sense. I think that would have made Project Hail Mary go down a bit easier for me personally, but because I read them, kind of back to back, month to month, I didn't really love it. I am very excited for the movie adaptation because The Martian film adaptation I think was done very, very well. Now, the creative team behind The Martian adaptation is not involved with the Project Hail Mary adaptation. That's fine. I think there's going to be a solid film to come, and I think I'll enjoy it, maybe a little bit more than the book. Next up, we have The Big Sleep Raymond Chandler's 1939 noir crime novel. And I will say, I very much enjoyed this. This is a 3 out of 5 for me, just because in terms of plot, I feel that our modern crime novel plotting has gotten a little bit more sophisticated. That is not to say that this is unsophisticated at all. Chandler's writing is, I mean, the epitome of place, the epitome of tone, the epitome of what it means to be in the dark underbelly of these worlds. I think, you know, a lot of modern readers may brush up against some of the language used in this book, but it still has a lot of value. There are bad people in the world, and those bad people say bad things, especially in 1939. I think we need to move away from canceling is such a bad word for this. Move away from calling these types of books problematic. There are bad people, and those bad people say bad things, as I just said, especially in 1939. So you may brush up against some of the language, but just understand that it is not gratuitous. It is not meant to offend or harm any modern reader, because it was written for a specific readership, and it was written with a specific tone of the seedy underbelly of modern society. So that's just my disclaimer, I guess. If that stuff really does rankle you, if you know, non-inclusive language really gets to you, this may not be the best book for you. But if you are a fan of hard-boiled crime, detective novels, film noir, this is kind of the apotheosis. This is kind of the beginning. This is kind of all things flow from The Big Sleep and Philip Marlowe, in my opinion. I think you also need to understand that this is not going to be a whodunit in the classic sense. This is not an Agatha Christie novel where you're trying to solve the puzzle. The puzzle seems to be very clear from the get-go. What this is a character study. It is a tone piece. It is trying to set yourself in the place of smoke-filled dark rooms, of double crosses, wheeling and dealing. If you're a fan of The Maltese Falcon, if you're a fan of, you know, Thief or any of the more modern noir tropes, you'll like this, because this is the bedrock. This is the beginning. This is the basis of a type of genre. I enjoyed this quite a bit. It did not reach the levels of a 5-star book for me. It's a little bit meandering in its plotting. There's moments where, like I said, the language does kind of grate on you. It is dated, but it is good enough to read, and I hope that people are continuing to read. It is for free on Kindle because it is like in their classic status. Did you know that a lot of these classic books you can just download on Kindle and have them until our great corporate overlords on Amazon takes them away from you, but you can read them for free. So that's what I did. I really enjoyed it. It's short. You're going to breeze through it. And hopefully you'll take some time to sit in the prose, to sit in Chandler's writing, because it is very unique. I don't think that we have many people that write in this type of style. And you'll know what I mean once you get into it. The amount of detail, the amount of setting the scene for his readers, I think has kind of gone out of fashion because we kind of need to get things going a little bit more plot-wise in more modern novels. At least that's my take. If you have a different take, let me know. But that's The Big Sleep, 3 out of 5. I did enjoy it. Next on my quest to read every Sanderson novel, we finished the newest Sanderson novel, The Isles of the Emberdark, and I have done a full review on that. Unfortunately, the timing is a little messed up, so you'll have to check back to the channel to see that, but I don't want to talk through the entire review on this video because I've already done that. So make sure you check back for that. It should come out maybe a week or two after this video drops. Safe to say I liked it, but I have questions about the larger Cosmere, the Cosmere Extended Universe, which we go more in depth on that video, so look out for that one. Finally, we reached my favorite fiction book of the month, The Shadow of the Gods, which felt like water in the desert of fantasy. I have been having such a difficult time with fantasy books this year specifically, trying to catch up on some of the backlog that I've missed, and just being, I guess, a little bit tired of the tongue-in-cheek nature of a lot of modern fantasy. It feels like every modern fantasy book that you read is kind of winking at you, being like, yeah, we know how ridiculous this is, elves and dwarves and all that. I get that. That definitely has its place, for sure. And sometimes I do enjoy those types of stories. But I had just been so inundated with that. I was looking for something that was going to take itself seriously. And John Gwynne definitely takes himself seriously. I had never read any of his stuff. I had not read his previous trilogy or any of his other works. This is my first foray into his writing style, and let me just say, it hits the nail on the head for me. This is 3.5, creeping up to 4, depending on how the rest of the series goes. That's usually what I do with my half stars. If it's the first book in a series, I'll give it a half star, and if the rest of the series really just carries through, we may bump that up to a 4. So 3.5, maybe 4 on this one. Something that I usually run into issues with is a lot of perspectives, a lot of POV perspectives in fantasy novels. This has 3, which I feel like is kind of the sweet spot for it. And it also helps that each of the POV chapters was interesting in its own right. I did not feel that I was being pulled out of the narrative to check in with another one of our characters. Each of the characters I felt held their own, and I wanted to know more about each of their stories, which I feel is pretty difficult to do. And it just was a propulsive narrative. I could not put this book down, had to keep reading it. I'm very excited to continue to read it. That was my favorite fiction book. Let's move to the nonfiction. I find myself reading a lot more film-centered books in the past couple of months, and the first book on our list is no different. This is the Coen Brothers book by Adam Naiman. This really ties the films together, which is a quote from The Big Lebowski. It's hard to talk about these books because this is such a wealth of knowledge. If you are familiar with the Coen brothers, if you are familiar with their work overall, if you are a fan of their work, or just want to get more in depth about the themes that they continue to use throughout their work, this is fantastic. But if you are not one of those people, I can't recommend this book to you because, you know, you're not going to get any of it. First and foremost, it's probably going to feel very boring to you. There needs to be homework done before you get to this book, right? You need to have seen all the films, in my opinion. I am a former film student. I am a former filmmaker. I guess I still make some types of films with these videos, but the Coen brothers were some of my biggest influences. I enjoy their work very, very much. I consider some of their earlier stuff, Fargo, Big Lebowski, to be kind of top 50 movies for me. So this was so fascinating. I enjoyed this so much. 3 out of 5, obviously, because it's hard to say that this is going to have a ton of staying power with me. I mean, maybe when I rewatch some of these movies, some of the points that Naiman makes, who is a great film critic in his own right, I would recommend, if you are interested in any type of film criticism, to seek his work out. But it's well researched, it's well thought. I think the ability to kind of weave themes throughout the Coen brothers' works is something that is very difficult to do, because in this world of having so much, I guess, access to the author, to the filmmaker, you can kind of tease out from them what their work actually means. And we've kind of lost a little bit of the death of the author scenario or I guess the death of the filmmaker in this case, where you as the viewer take ownership of what you're watching and kind of parse out some of the deeper meanings, the deeper themes. Naiman does a really good job of doing that, even though there are some cases where the Coen brothers have given interviews or talked about their work or done commentary that may, you know, disprove some of the claims thematically that Naiman is trying to make through this work. It still is an interesting piece of criticism to kind of see how does he prove the themes that he's trying to assume out of these works. I found that to be very interesting. So if you're interested at all in the Coen brothers, their filmmaking, their themes, give this one a read. In the same vein, we have a story very similar, Wes Anderson and the filmmaker's iconic works. This was just candy to me. Wes Anderson is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, which can be very divisive. He has a very specific style. I kind of love that style, and so I will watch anything and everything that has been made, directed, touched, even the short films by Wes Anderson. Again, if you are a fan of his work, this will be a great piece for you. This does not delve as deeply into the themes of Anderson's work. More so, it kind of gives you an overall picture of his history, kind of his thought process throughout each. It kind of synthesizes a lot more interviews that Anderson has done. It is a non-authorized work, so there's no first-person primary sourcing being done. It's more so being pulled in from secondary sources, which is totally fine. Sometimes that does kind of rankle me a little bit because, you know, things can change throughout the years, but reading the boots on the ground interviews from when he was making Bottle Rocket or Rushmore in the early 90s is pretty interesting to see how his filmmaking style has developed, how his thought process has developed, how he's built out his team. Just fantastic. If you like Wes Anderson at all, if you have, you know, engaged with some of his work, this is a great one. I really like the cover of this book. Even though I only had it on Kindle, I went out and ordered it on Amazon because the cover, because it's based on probably my favorite Wes Anderson book, one of the Mendel's boxes of candy confectionery goods from Grand Budapest Hotel. Enough about Wes Anderson. This is not a film channel yet. Maybe. Who knows? But let's move on to our next nonfiction. From a film themes criticism book all the way to the other end, which is more of an industry story, we have MCU, which is, you know, I have it right here. Ooh. Sorry, close up. We have MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios. This was a barn burner, a page turner. I would not say that I'm the biggest fan of comic book movies. I did participate in the wave as it was cresting, I think through 2019 with Endgame, but I have been baffled by the choices that the studio has made in terms of the last 5 or 6 years of content, of films and television that they have put out. I have found a lot of them to be downright bad. So I wanted to kind of get a more of an inside look. This is the most in-depth look at the first 15-ish years of Marvel Studios, the film studio. It is more industry focused. There's a lot more talk about wheeling and dealing, about, studio heads arguing over IP. So if you're looking for more of an in-depth look at the films themselves, you're not really going to get that. But this book is definitely worth your time if you are in any way interested in the machinations of Hollywood and how these global billion-dollar franchises get built, get made. Kevin Feige and his, tentacle-like control of this overall narrative. And if you are like me and dismayed at kind of where the MCU is going, I just saw Fantastic Four yesterday. Woof, not my favorite thing in the world. But I'm just baffled by this was such a cultural hegemon. This had such a hold on it. If you were not there in 2019, sitting in a movie theater as Endgame played, you do not know how much, this may be the last vestige of the monoculture that we will have, because everything is now so parsed out and individuated that we may never get back to a point where everybody in that theater is locked in and it was the only thing people talked about for like a week and a half, which seems unheard of. We go through things in like 3 hours online now. So I was so fascinated with that process and then kind of the downfall. And I think that this book lays it out almost perfectly. If you are in any way, shape, or form interested in that story, give it a shot. It reads really fast. It's very well written. I had a good time with it. It's 3.5 out of 5. Next up, we have Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s, which was my 100th book, which is kind of crazy, reading a conspiracy theory-fueled book. This is fascinating. This book is a counter-narrative to Helter Skelter, which is the true crime, book written by the prosecutor of the Charles Manson murders that was kind of touted as the narrative. It is what happened. This book kind of disproves a lot of that, which is very interesting, but it also is more of a portrait of obsession. If you've ever seen JFK, Oliver Stone's film about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, you realize that while that movie takes so many liberties, there are so many factual inaccuracies. That movie is important and powerful because of the look that it gives you into obsession, the look that it gives you into pulling at the threads, how people can become embroiled in, I guess, conspiracy theories when the narrative doesn't make sense. The murder of a president doesn't make sense to that nation. So people begin to pull at the threads, create conspiracies. This is the same type of thing. These were grisly murders of people put on a pedestal. These were murders in Hollywood done by hippies, beatniks, whatever you want to say. And it confused the nation. So they wanted to get a pretty stock story about a crazy person who had influence on a lot of other semi-crazy people who wanted to start a race war. That seems cut and dry for the 60s. It was a story that everybody ate up. As you read through this Chaos book, Tom McNeil kind of starts to pull at some of those threads, offering you, the reader, the ability to make your own choices, to do your own research, if you want to use a hot button phrase of today. I found this to be fascinating. I found myself always questioning, can I even believe any of this stuff? Although it does feel well sourced, there is also always in the back of your mind when you're engaging in any of these types of conspiracy-like texts, maybe this person just is a little bit too close to the problem. This was a 20-year project, and the author himself makes claims all the time like, I don't know, could this truly be the truth? So take it all with a grain of salt, but if you're looking for just a sizzling conspiracy theory novel, this is the one for you. The last two are 4 out of 5s. I really, really enjoyed both of them. First up, we've got Operation Paperclip, the secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to the United States. This is scathing. This is incredibly difficult to read. This book is so well researched. This book uncovers a lot of the CIA operations to bring high-level Nazi and former Nazi scientists to the United States within 6 months to a year of the war ending, of the toppling of the Third Reich. People who were operating within the concentration camps, within a year, were naturalized into the United States and working for our government. That's a tough sit. That is a tough thing to wrap your mind around. And then, to go even further, these scientists had integral parts in our space program, in creating day-to-day technology that you and I continue to use. This is a difficult book to get through. These are questions that we have to ask ourselves. What is our personal responsibility? What is it, just to understand that the technology that we're using was made by some not savory characters, to say the very least? Obviously, yes, to understand that is important. You and I, as individuals, we have to make decisions, because there are things in this world that were made by people who are not so great, who are murderers, who have participated in genocide. How do we reckon with that? I found this book to be so fascinating because it doesn't offer answers to those questions. It offers those questions and allows its readers to come to their own terms. You are going to have to come to your own terms in the same way that I daily am going to have to come to my own terms as well. Fascinating. If you have no idea about this history, this is the type of stuff that they do not teach you in school, obviously. You learn the top layer of these types of stories, and you got to dig a little bit deeper to get more of this information. But this is a fascinating piece of work. I really enjoyed it. Annie Jacobson is the author, and she knocks it out of the park, man. I really love this in a way that you can love something that is so incredibly evil to look at. It's truly fascinating. It's not a ton of fun, but I encourage you to read it because it is important, especially if you are interested in any type of history of World War II or the ramifications of World War II, how the Cold War shaped the rest of the world. This is a great book for you. Finally, my favorite book of the month, Killers of the Flower Moon, David Grann, slowly creeping up on Erik Larson's corner. You got to be careful, man. I mean, those two feel to me to be on another level of popular history that I think people are trying to catch up with. This book is told through three different parts, three different perspectives. It's the Osage murders and the founding of the FBI. It has been turned into a film, a great piece of film work, in my opinion. But I wanted to get, the boots on the ground reporting, the actual book itself, the story of it. I found this to be utterly fascinating. Another in the long line of Native American abuses that were perpetrated by, people in the United States as they continued to settle the West and kind of try and integrate the Native American peoples, especially the Osage people. It's so fascinating to read about a tribe that is given so much wealth because they were settled onto land that was abundant in oil, and just kind of what that injection of wealth into a community that was looked at as lesser than by the outside community, and how the outside community tried to weasel their way in to get some of that wealth. It's just such an interesting story that I think is very unique in the grander narrative of Native American relations with the white people of this country. I just found it so interesting because I had no idea. These are, when I read history and I find a pocket of history that I have no idea about, that is what really gets me going, because there's just so much. And we get, like I said, we get the top level narrative, which is nobody's fault. I mean, you only have a semester of, US history or whatever in high school. You get that top level narrative, but you've got to do a little bit more work to try and drill down into, the actual narratives. And this is, fascinating. It's just such a good read. It reads so well. It's so well written. If you take one book away out of this monthly recap, I would recommend that you go check out Killers of the Flower Moon. David Grann, one of my favorites. Really enjoyed it. So that's it. We reached 100. We're actually on 104, I believe, for the year. We're going to try and get to 150. I hope your reading journey is going very well. If you have any questions or comments about the books that I talked about in this video, or you have recommendations, leave them down in the comments below. I read through every single comment. I love to build the community of people who want to read, people who love to read, just people in general. So whatever you got, hit me in the comments. I hope you're reading something very, very good, and I will speak to you in the next video.